Welcome to today's edition of the Rush 24/7 podcast.
You know what the great thing about today's show is? Aside from the fact that it's on, is that the audience, if you're watching the drive-by news, or drive-by media the last 3 days about the Russian dossier, you already know it all. You knew it all Tuesday. You knew it all Wednesday. I'm looking at the news today. I'm watching cable news. I'm reading the newspapers. You know it all already. So what am I going to do?
Live from the Southern Command in sunny...
We're 3 days ahead of everybody here.
It's Open Line Friday.
And maybe even further ahead than that. Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to review some of it, but we're going to play and discuss the way the Democrats are trying to cover their rear ends on this, and the way the drive-bys are trying to give the Democrats cover on this. Kimberly Strassel has a great piece at the Wall Street Journal that will add some new direction to this. But aside from that, folks, you know it all. It's great to have you. Telephone number 800-282-2882. The email address lrushbo@eibnet.us. Let's get some other things out of the way first. Friday, we're going to be starting with the audio soundbites here at the top. The U.S. economy was expected to grow in the last quarter at 2.7%, but now they've actually revised the number up, and it's now official. U.S. economy grew at a 3% rate from July to September. Under Obama, the economy grew at an average of 2.1% a year. He did not have, it says here, he had many quarters where growth exceeded at 3%. He didn't. That's the whole point. He didn't. Obama's economic growth sometimes was less than 2%. There's no way Obama was in the 3%. Especially here, what does it say, many quarters? Anyway, the economy is booming in a lot of sectors, and this is it's one of the great unspokens and as such unreferenced aspects that are positive of the Trump administration, and the Democrats are running around wondering why they haven't been able to destroy Trump and why they haven't really been able to do much damage in terms of approval numbers and so forth. And the answer is what James Carville always said, is the economy is stupid. And consumer confidence rolling into the Christmas season said to be an all-time high. So that is, and by the way, this is including the hurricanes, despite the hurricanes, which are always used as an excuse for a slowdown in economic activity. This 3% growth happened despite the hurricanes. Also, Mick Mulvaney, who is a Rush baby, we've interviewed him for the Limbaugh letter, and he is the Director of Office and Management and Budget. You know, it turns out yesterday I was wrong about something, and it's rare when I'm wrong. It's so rare, people love pointing it out. By the way, Dawn, were you up today at 3 o'clock to order the new iPhone 10? Okay. Well, I said yesterday that the top 10... No, I don't get up at 3 o'clock to order phones. If I'm up at... Even if I was up at 3 o'clock, I wouldn't have ordered it. That's not how... No. No. I was just teasing. I knew you weren't up. I knew that you not on your list of prioritized interests. That's why I asked you. I was just being facetious. Anyway, I thought yesterday that the top 10% were paying 40%. No. Top 1% are paying 40%, and the top 10% were paying 60% of total tax revenue. Now, this came, there was a poll, it's a Fox News poll, and it's got some of the screwiest results in it. It's something like 80% of the American people don't think the rich are paying enough. Unusually high numbers of people who think the middle class are paying too much. And none of that is accurate, but it's what people think. And so that's why there's not going to be a tax rate cut for the top 1%, or maybe even top 5%, because of that polling data. There's not a politician in the world that wants to be seen giving the rich a tax cut when 80% of the people, or 78%, think the rich aren't paying enough already. But the real numbers are even more shocking. Try this, folks. 95% of all taxes are paid by the top 20%. That is an all-time high. It has never been there. Last night, Georgetown University, Mick Mulvaney, who is the director of the Office of Management and Budget, spoke about Trump's tax reform plan, and the moderator was somebody named Kathy Koch, and she said the way the benefits of this tax cut falls across different income taxes is going to be a real arithmetic trick. Does anybody know what that question means? This is the moderator of the event. Let me read the question. The way the benefits of this tax cut falls. It should be the way the benefits of this tax cut fall. But the way the benefits of this tax cut falls across different income taxes is going to be a real arithmetic trick. What is the different income taxes? Now, I, your host, know what she meant. She said the way the benefits of this tax cut fall across the different rates, the different brackets, is going to be a real arithmetic trick. No, it isn't. There's no trick here. There aren't any arithmetic tricks. Arithmetic math is just pure logic. Anyway, here's Mulvaney's answer to whatever that question was.
Top 20% pay 95% of the taxes. If you break the income tax universe into what we call quintiles, so equal-sized 20% columns, the first two columns, the first quintile and the lower quintile, don't pay any taxes at all. In fact, they net positive. We pay them when they file up a tax return. That middle quintile, which you might describe, some people do as middle class, pays an effective rate in the low single digits. And all of the taxes are paid by folks in the top two quintiles, and that last quintile pays almost fully 95%, I think, of the tax.
This is just unreal. Now, if you're still confused about a quintile, it's just dividing by 5 instead of by quarters. So they're dividing the taxpayers into 5 different groups here, and each one of them equals 20%, obviously. So the top 20%, that top quintile, 95% of all income taxes. The top 20%. Now, let me give you another startling statistic. Now, this is not going to be exact because I haven't seen the recent revision of this. But 5 years ago, this was true. If you earned $55,000 a year, you were in the top 10% of income earners in America. Is that not shocking as well? Now, we think of the top 20% as the gazillionaires, the billionaires, the millionaires, and they're in there. But you really need to go to the top 1% to get the gazillionaires and the billionaires, and the top 5% to pick up everybody that are the millionaires. And maybe that wouldn't even do it. Maybe the top 2%, 3 at most, is what you would do if you want to include millionaires in this. So the top 20%, that's a pretty broad income spectrum there. It still is just unreal that the top 20% are paying 95% of all tax revenue. And you balance that against what the Fox News poll yesterday, nobody is aware of this. Well, not nobody, you are, because we've made this a seminal point of this program for all of the years that we've been here, because it matters. But a full 80% of taxpayers are paying 5%. And as Mulvaney said, the bottom 50%, or the bottom 40 in this case, are paying nothing, and in effect are being given a refund every year via the earned income tax credit. There simply isn't any truth to the notion that the rich are not paying their fair share, and there isn't any truth to the notion that the middle class are paying most of the burden. And then Mulvaney, now this gets tough to listen to because it's numbers, but he tries to explain the math behind this so-called tax cut for the rich.
People always ask at the time, why do you guys want to give a tax cut to the rich? Here's the math. We have a progressive tax system, which means that if you make $1 million and I make $50,000, we both pay the exact same rate on the first, let's say, $20,000. And then from the next 20 up to my 50 and her next 20 to her next 50, we pay the same. I think it's probably 12% or 15. I can't remember where the brackets are right now. And then she goes on to pay her higher rate on the stuff that she makes, and I stop. Right? Well, if you want to give me in the middle class a cut, you take my 15% rate, say, down to 10%, right? And that gives the middle class a cut. Guess who else benefits from that? She does, because she pays that same rate on the way up the brackets. You can sit there and do nothing but lower the rates on the middle class, and all other things being equal, you're going to give the rich a tax cut.
Now, let me walk you through this. Did you understand? All right. Yeah, it's tough when you're using numbers. It's really tough when you're using numbers. I'm going to use different examples than the Office of Management and Budget Director. I'm going to use 100,000 because it gives us more room to play here. We've got the brackets. We'll use the brackets of 39, 35, 28, and 15. And we're talking about income of $100,000. If you make $1 million, you still make $100,000 to start with. Not all of your $1 million is taxed at the same. Well, now, in the case of millionaires, it is. In the case of millionaires, they don't step through this. They charge you 39% on pretty much everything. So let's say it's income at $500,000. The person that makes $100,000 will pay on the first $10,000 or $20,000 he earns the 12% or 15% rate. And then the next bracket of that $100,000 he earns, you'll pay at 28%. And then the last percentage of that $100,000 he earns, he will pay the top rate of 35%. That's the marginal rate. The marginal rate is the last rate you pay on the income you earn. So if you earn $100,000 and somebody earns $50,000, you pay the same percentage on the income that's equal, $50,000. The person making $100,000 earns $50,000 first, and the person earning $50,000, they pay the same rates on that $50,000. Then the guy that's earning $100,000 has two more rates to pay on his way. He'll have 28% and 35%. Now, I don't know where the 35 kicks in, but the point is the guy earning $100,000 is paying the same percentages on half of his income as the person making $50,000. Mulvaney's point is if you cut the 12% rate and the 15% rate, you're also going to be cutting that rate for the guy making $100,000. Because the first $50,000 he makes will also be subject to the new lower rates. So his point is, when you lower rates for the middle class, you cannot help but lower rates for everybody. Because everybody is going to be subject to all of those brackets up to the total taxable income they report. And we're talking taxable income here, $100,000 versus $50,000. So the person earning $50,000 will pay taxes. Well, actually, this person doesn't pay much at all, but in the math example we're using, that person would pay a percentage at 12 and a percentage at 15 and be done. The person making $100,000 would pay the same 12 and the same 15 up to his first $50,000, but then two more rates kick in for him, 28 and 35 on his way to $100,000. But those first two rates, the 12 and the 15, if they're cut to 10 and 12, they're going to be cut to 10 and 12 for everybody. So Mulvaney's point is you cut the middle class tax rates. It is axiomatic, it's automatic, and it is unavoidable that the rich are going to get the same tax cuts on the first $50,000 they earn. Not everything, just the first $50,000. So that's what he was trying to explain here. I got to take a break. We'll do that and be back. Don't go away, folks. Let me give you one more stat here, folks, to illustrate who really pays taxes. What's the population in New York City? Give me the number. No, I'm just the city. I'm not talking about the tri-state area. 8 million people. Well, it's probably 7.5 because 500,000 probably have left since the last time. But we'll figure 8 million, okay? Would you believe that 1/2 of New York City's tax revenue, 8 million people, 1/2 of the city's income is paid by 34,500 people. They are the rich. They are the people not paying their fair share. 34,500 people out of 8 million are paying nearly half, or as Clinton would say, contributing nearly half of the city's taxes. You remember Clinton, when he was raising everybody's taxes, referred to them as contributions. We needed more contributions from people. But see, even these facts are not going to sway anybody. It's just etched in stone that the rich don't pay their fair share, that the rich get all these tax breaks, that the rich aren't paying anything, and that the middle class is bearing the full burden. And people believe it because the Democrats, it's not just Democrats, media, everybody's been spreading that BS for decades, and it's become part of the traditional class envy. By the way, speaking of that, there's a story in the stack. There's a lot of postmortems now starting to be written by Democrats. Well, actually, they've been written. They're increasing in volume. You know, what went wrong? Why did Hillary lose? Because now that the Russia thing is vanishing, and it is, there are now other opinion pieces being written, and the latest one is from a guy, forget his name, who says the Democrats have got to get off this racial identity stuff. We got to stop dividing people. We need to go back to class warfare. We need to get back to class warfare if we're ever going to start winning elections again, meaning we got to start pitting people against each other economically instead of racially and with gender. But no matter how you do it, the Democrat Party still believes the way they can win, the only way is to pit groups of Americans against each other. The Democrat Party simply doesn't have it in itself to promote a national unity. They are always going to need demons. They're going to need devils. They're going to need bad guys to blame everything on as a means of convincing people to vote against Republicans and conservatives, because what the Democrats ultimately admit is that they do not have enough reasons to offer people to vote for them. And this, to me, represents yet another great opportunity the Republican Party has, because the Democrats can't be honest about their agenda. They can't be honest about why they want people to vote for them, so they have to demonize. But this identity politics and pitting people against each other on sexual ID, sexual orientation, racial makeup, all this, it's destructive. It's tearing them and everybody apart. And it's not promoting harmony in any way, shape, manner, or form. Okay, those are a couple things out of the way. We'll come back now and resume our discussions of the dossier and where we are on that. Open line Friday. Rush Limbaugh executing his signed host duties flawlessly. Zero mistakes. The phone number, 800-282-2882. All right, let me run through the stack here of the Clinton and the Trump dossier here, even though it's folks, it's weird. You know it all. And I hate to be repetitive other than for informative or educational reasons, but you really are. You knew all of this that's now in the drive-bys 3 days ago. You actually knew it before that, because I've been telling you the truth about this dossier for months. Now that it's been confirmed, now the rats are scurrying and trying to make sure the light of exposure does not hit them. But this goes all the way to the Obama White House. And it involves uranium-1, and now that informant, having been granted the exemption from his non-disclosure agreement, and he is free to testify. His lawyer, Victoria Tensing, making the rounds in the media. And this is going to be devastating. That scandal, the Uranium One scandal, let me stop and think of this for a second. Strip everything away. What happened? 20% of the American uranium supply ends up in a Russian company, and the route it took enriched Bill and Hillary Clinton and their foundation. 20% of the American uranium supply, and it was a hidden transaction that they didn't want anybody to ever know. Peter Schweitzer first wrote about it in his book Clinton Cash. It has all but been confirmed now, and that has tentacles that reach all the way to the Obama White House. And one of the things that is proving true here, when the Democrats start bellyaching and launching allegations about Republicans, it turns out more often than not that the Democrats have actually done it. For example, the dossier. The Democrats have been trying to make the case that Trump was colluding with the Russians to rig the election and steal it from Hillary Clinton. And it's the Democrats that have been making this charge, and they produced this dossier as evidence. The dossier is totally fake and phony and made up. The Democrats and the Clinton campaign paid for it. The Obama administration well knew about it. And it was used as the basis and foundation for real investigations of Trump and his people. And everybody involved knew that it was bogus. Everybody. And the Democrats are out talking about it and the collusion. And what does it turn out to be true? What turns out to be true is that it was the Democrats colluding with the Russians. It was the Clinton campaign colluding with the Russians. It was the Clinton campaign paying, which is a violation of the law, paying essentially at the end of the trail the Russians to create phony intelligence about Hillary's presidential opponent. And then the Washington establishment from the White House on down treats the product of that project, the dossier, as real intelligence gathered by intelligence professionals. And it formed the basis of an investigation into Trump. And it was nothing but a pack of lies from the get-go. That it was a work of art, if you will, commissioned by Hillary and the Democrat Party. Totally made up. And while they're out there bellyaching about Trump and collusion, it's actually Hillary and the Democrat Party who were colluding with the Russians. And so often, when Democrats start leveling charges, by the time you get to the end of the trail on it, you find out it is they, the Democrats, who've actually been doing the very thing that they are accusing Republican opponents of doing. Now, this headline from the Politico. GOP winds down Russia probe with Trump collusion unanswered. This is hilarious. I mean, you talk about something ending with a whimper. Think about where this was just 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, 6 months ago. They thought they had Trump. This dossier was it. They were going to convince everybody Trump was unfit, that Trump had colluded with the Russians, that he was a traitor. And now the truth has emerged, and we get this headline. GOP winds down Russia probes with Trump collusion unanswered. You know, this is another thing. All of these congressional investigations have been a mockery. Every one of these congressional investigations, which have been focused on trying to find out whether or not Trump illegally colluded with Russia, have been a total waste of time. They have been a purposeful waste of time, a purposeful misdirection of both resources and intent. There was never anything here to find. There was nothing that ever happened between Trump and the Russians or Trump's people and the Russians. There's nothing. After all of these months, there's nothing. And yet we've had congressional investigations that the Democrats on these committees have demanded. Oh, and by the way, some of the Republicans did too. Some of the Republicans bought all of this hook, line, and sinker in their Trump hatred, in their wish to become heroes and be part of the movement to get rid of Trump. You know, people like Corker, people like Jeff Flake. thought they would become heroes by speaking out against this reprobate that's in the White House. And it is they, now forced to leave Washington in shame. Flake with 16% of the vote in a polling data result out in Arizona. A Corker, a decision not to run again. And all of these guys thought that they were going to become great heroes by standing up and refusing to be part of this travesty and this outrage of Donald Trump in the White House any longer. So there were plenty of Republicans on some of these committees. And I listened to them talk. I listened to Richard Burr, some of these people talk. He's the senator, Republican senator in charge of the Intel Committee in the Senate. I said, what do you guys... I've been stunned that they believe this at all. To believe this is to be totally ignorant and innocent of Democrat Party techniques. To not have any suspicion about the validity of this. To go ahead and call for investigations, employ staff, go out and hire a bunch of independent lawyers to serve as investigators. Think of the money that was wasted on what essentially is a hoax. GOP winds down Russia probes with Trump collusion unanswered. It's not unanswered. There isn't any. Now, part of this is Politico, and part of this is just the way the media is writing this, because then, folks, I'm going to tell you something else. I don't think that the leftist media is ever going to let this go. I don't care what we learn and what is proven about Hillary and the DNC and buying this dossier and paying for it to be written. I don't think the Democrats are ever going to let it go because they don't have anything else. And I'll tell you why. Anybody know the name David Corn? You know who David Corn is, right? He is an uber leftist / communist. He writes at The Nation, or did. Anyway, wherever he is writing now, I don't have it in front of me, but he published a piece today, and it's basically about how the media has blown it in not getting to the bottom of Trump's collusion with Russia. In the midst of all of this that we've learned about the dossier and its origins and its fakery, this guy writes a piece on how it's still a story waiting to be discovered. Trump collusion with Russia happened, and the media has blown it. And halfway through this piece is a request that readers send money to the publication so they can continue. So the publication that he worked, if it's The Nation, I forget what it is in dire straits. So a piece is written to satisfy the unquenchable thirst and hunger that the leftist has to see Trump sent packing. So they write a piece claiming that it's still a story waiting to be discovered, but the U.S. media has dropped the ball. But Corn says we, at The Nation or wherever he is, we will continue this quest, and we will find the evidence that Trump colluded. But we need your help. It's a solicitation. It's a fundraising solicitation right in the middle of the article. For that reason alone, they're never going to drop this. Another reason is they are never going to admit there was nothing to this, because that would be admitting that they followed a series of lies and untruths around. The truth is, I think everybody has known this is bogus. Everybody who's been involved in this has known to one degree or another it's bogus, but those same people have held out a lot of hope that something in it is true, because the objective is to get Trump at any cost. So they're not going to let this go. They're not going to admit that there's nothing to it. They're going to keep investigating because it's all they've got. So be prepared for that. Even if Hillary and people go to jail over this, or Uranium One, they're not going to give up on Trump colluding with Russia. Get ready. Be prepared. Back with more in a moment. David Corn's story is written in Mother Jones. So he's moved on from The Nation. The Nation's still run by Hurricane Katrina Vanden Heuvel. But David Corn's moved on to Mother Jones. They're begging for money in the middle of a promise not to let go of the Trump-Russia collusion story, despite the fact the media's dropped the ball. Also, folks, there is a fascinating piece today in a story, ESPN the magazine, about the latest owners' meetings, where the players met with the owners to discuss the future going forward, what to do about anthem protests. And this piece, if it's true, and there's a caveat for that because it's the media, A, B, it's ESPN. So if it's true, this story portrays the owners as the least powerful people in the room. That Goodell and the liberal left-wing executives of the NFL were telling everybody what's going to be, what's going to happen, what is. They wouldn't even let Jerry Jones in one of the meetings because they didn't want him to put forward the proposition that players will be benched if they don't stand for the anthem. Didn't even want to deal with it. Jerry Jones tends to run the NFL meetings among the owners. They didn't want to let him in there. It's a really eye-opening piece. And it just, folks, it illustrates to a T. This league doesn't get it. They're run by a bunch of left-wing execs, many of whom have never been in football before. They come from marketing and retailing. There are some women in ranking positions of marketing and so forth in the NFL. The PR department is all former Obama and Clinton. It's not surprising to me. What's surprising to me is it got written. So that's something else I want to get into as the program unfolds. Here is Claire. We try to go to the phones in the first hour automatically on Open Line Friday. She is in Stuyvesant, New York. Great to have you. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm calling just because I'm in the middle of reading What Happened right now, Hillary's latest book. And it's just funny. Two different times she brings up the dossier and says, but nobody had any proof of what happened. And it's just highly ironic given the latest news.
Yeah. What's your opinion of this book? I mean, why did you want to read this book in the first place?
Oh, because I wanted something entertaining to read.
Really? No, you picked it up because you wanted to be entertained by reading what the loser wrote about what went wrong?
Yes, and it is. She just blames everyone except for herself, really.
Nothing new about that.
That's the whole book.
Modus operandi. Now, what specifically did she say about, did you say she writes something about the dossier? What'd she say about that?
Well, one of them, she says, then there were the whispers going around Washington that the Russians had compromising information on Trump, possibly a salacious videotape from a Moscow hotel, but nobody had any proof. And then there was another reference as well, but I don't know where that was.
That sounds like a CYA reference, which is ample, by the way. It sounds like a, I think, analyzing where Hillary Clinton is on this right now is not very difficult. Hillary Clinton claims, by the way, they're all claiming, Debbie Blabbermouth Schultz and John Podesta and Hillary Clinton, everybody, well, what do you mean? Pay the fusion GP? We didn't know anybody was paying. We didn't know anything about this. They're all in CYA mode. They have been caught. They tried to cover all of this up. None of this was ever going to come out if Hillary had won. But now it's all been blown sky high, and she's the least credible on this. They've all really been nabbed. Hey, look, before you go, Claire, I'm going to ask you a question. You do not have to say yes, okay? And I'm not trying to put pressure on you. But this was new iPhone order day, the iPhone 10. Do you have an iPhone?
I do not have an iPhone.
Well, okay. Is that because you don't care about iPhones? Because if you don't care about them, that's okay. That's no big deal.
I don't care about them. I have a non-smartphone still.
You have a Oh, okay. And you're happy with that? Fine.
Yes, I am.
Fine and dandy. All right. Well, look, I appreciate your call. I do. Thank you very much. That's Claire. She's in Stuyvesant, New York. Wasting time reading the Hillary book. What happened? What happened? You happened, Hillary. Who's next? This is Caden. Caden in Reno. Great to have you. What?
Hi, Mr. Limbaugh.
Hi.
This is just I just want to say this, how much of an honor this is to be speaking with you and on your show. I'm doing a speech on Monday in my speech and debate class on why the minimum wage should not be increased.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you could give me a couple of talking points on why raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour would affect the economy or just business in general.
Okay, Kate, but first, before I answer this, do you have a computer? You're able to Google things and search them?
Yeah.
Okay, because you're going to need to do this, because you're going to find the evidence I'm going to give you.
Okay.
Seattle. You need to search Seattle and restaurants and find out what happened to them after the minimum wage was raised to $15 an hour. A bunch of them closed, Caden. Raising the minimum wage, choosing an arbitrary number that has nothing to do with the market, and demanding that the least qualified earn that money means that people get fired. Businesses do not have a pile of money they're not using that they can go raise wages from. They have to earn it via sales or whatever. And so what happens when the minimum wage is raised arbitrarily on the command of government? What happens is that people lose their jobs. More people end up out of work, and the resulting increase in the minimum wage is not enough to counterbalance that at all. But you Google Seattle and restaurants, and you'll find out the number of restaurants that have had to close since they raised the minimum wage to $15. It'll be your argument right there. You can do your entire report on that story. Kimberly Strassel, Wall Street Journal, the coming bombshells from the latest of the dossier story. It's good, and it's a great addendum to what is already known by those of you in this audience past 3 days. So sit tight. We're coming back with more Open Line Friday momentarily. Hey, with John Podesta. John Podesta lied about this dossier. I mean, through his nose, he was talking to a Senate committee. He lied to a Senate committee, said he didn't know who funded the dossier, and Mark Elias was sitting right next to him. Mark Elias is the lawyer who lied about it for a year, who did pay for it, who works for the law firm hired by the Clinton campaign.
Live from the Southern Command in sunny South Florida, it's Open Line Friday!
Greetings, my friends, and welcome back. You are tuned to the most listened to radio talk show in America. Our audience is now skirting past 27 million. It's just unbelievable. Normally, after elections, audiences kind of level off. And some shows even experience a little bit of loss. We don't. But there has been a steady growth of the audience since the election. It's unusual, but it makes perfect sense. Great to have you here. Open Line Friday means whatever you want to talk about. Doesn't have to be the dossier. Doesn't have to be politics. It can be anything. 800-282-2882 is the number. And if you want to send an email, I check them by scanning subject lines. It's lrushbo@eibnet.us. Now, I mentioned Kimberly Strassel. She's at the Wall Street Journal. We've interviewed her for the Limbaugh letter in issue earlier this year. And she's excellent. And she's one of these people that, despite everybody who's talking about this, including me, she always ends up with a unique take. Do you realize how hard that is to do? I mean, how many pundits are there out there now? And how many commentators? And how many people writing and publishing on the internet? And people, offering their thoughts on Facebook and Twitter. And yet, when you tune into Kimberly Strassel, the odds are you'll get a take on it that you haven't seen anywhere else. And she titles her piece, The Coming Russia Bombshells, in the Wall Street Journal. The fusion GPS saga is not over. The Clinton DNC funding is but a first glimpse into the shady election doings concealed within the walls of the opposition research firm Fusion GPS. By the way, you know what I have found? I've run into a lot of people that, well, when I say a lot, I mean the universe of people that I, shoot the garbage with. A lot of people think Fusion GPS is CrowdStrike. Apparently, a lot of people think that Fusion GPS is a tech firm that does forensic analysis of computers and networks. And they're confusing that with CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike was hired by the DNC to forensically analyze their computer system and their network that got hacked that they wouldn't let the FBI see. But it's the word Fusion GPS that makes people think this is a tech firm. This is an opposition research firm. This is a bunch of people that runs around and does everything they can to find dirt on the opponents of Democrats. They are exclusively dirt diggers, and in the case of this dossier, they simply made it up. And they hired Russians to provide the phony intel. And they were hired by a law firm working exclusively with the Clinton campaign and the Democrat National Committee. And one of the members of this law firm has worked in the Obama administration and Clinton administrations. These people are inseparable. They are entirely linked together. And that's why Strassel here says that the Fusion GPS saga isn't over. The Clinton DNC funding is but a first glimpse into the shady doings of this Oppo research firm. And that's exactly what they are. They have nothing to do with Fareed Zakaria GPS. They got nothing to do with Fusion drives in your Mac computer. See how names can confuse people? Like Brian has a Fusion drive in his Mac. Fusion, I know what that is. No, this is an opposition research firm. What's a Fusion drive? 10% solid state, 90% spinning old-fashioned hard drives. Anyway, Kimberly Strassel says, we now know where Fusion got some of its money, but the next question is how they used it. With whom did Fusion work beyond Christopher Steele, the former British spy? Who did Fusion GPS pay, and who else was paying them? The answers are in their bank records. Fusion GPS has refused to divulge the names of its clients for months now, despite extraordinary pressure. In fact, you've heard Trump reference this. The only reason that it has leaked out that the DNC paid Fusion and Hillary paid Fusion is that congressional investigators were going to compel them to divulge the information. They have been trying to parcel out little bits of information before investigators, hoping to stanch the bleeding. They have been reluctant. They have been stonewalling. They've been refusing subpoenas or close to it. But they announced this because it was going to get blown anyway. And so what Strassel's point is here, there's going to be even more to learn about this bunch and who they are and who's been paying them and what they've been buying in their bank records, which they have refused to divulge. They won't even divulge the name of their clients. There have been extraordinary governmental pressure on this group to do so. They've so far resisted. Why did Fusion GPS suddenly insist that the middleman law firm Perkins Coie release Fusion from confidentiality agreements, spill the beans on who hired it? Why did that happen? Because that's why we know, that's how we know that Clinton and the DNC hired them. We know because Fusion GPS insisted that Perkins Coie release them from the attorney-client privilege confidentiality agreement. Why? Well, Kimberly Strassel says it's because there's something else that Fusion really wants to keep secret, even more than the news that Clinton and the DNC paid them. And that something is in those bank records. The release of the client names was a last-ditch effort to appease the House Intelligence Committee, which issued subpoenas to Fusion's bank. They were close to getting the records until Fusion filed suit last week. The release was also likely aimed at currying favor with the court, given Fusion's otherwise weak legal case. The judge could rule on this as early as this morning. Now, I don't know that the judge has ruled, but she is of the belief that at some point down the line, Fusion is going to be forced to surrender its bank records. And when that happens, then the lid is really going to blow on this group and who has been paying them and what they have been buying. And it is likely going to go way beyond the Trump dossier. That's just one element of the sleaze and the lying Oppo research that they've been getting into. Now, she says if the House wins, don't be surprised if those records include money connected to Russians. I think this is what Fusion GPS wants to protect at all costs. The entire premise of the Democrat media investigation of Donald Trump has been that he colluded with Russia to steal the election from the woman who deserved to win it, Hillary Clinton. Hillary has been robbed. She's the most cheated on woman in America, and now she's the most stolen from woman in America. And the thrust of this is that Trump was in bed with the Russians. Trump was hiring prostitutes to urinate on a bed that Obama and Michelle used at a Moscow hotel. Trump is a sleaze reprobate, and he and Putin are best friends. And what they are hell-bent on preventing at Fusion GPS is the discovery that they are the ones that have been in collusion with Russia. And it's the bank records of Fusion GPS which will demonstrate this. In the past, Fusion GPS has worked with Russians, including that lawyer, Natalia Veselnitskaya. Remember her? She happened to show up later in Donald Trump Jr.'s office claiming to have dirt on Hillary. And it turned that's how she got the meeting. She claimed to have dirt on Hillary. Donald Jr. took the meeting. That meeting allowed the media to say Trump Jr. was colluding with the Russians. She didn't have any dirt on Hillary. She was interested in a piece of legislation involving adoption. It had nothing to do with Hillary. It was a lying pretext to get the meeting so that they could report the Trumps were trying to collude. And that was Natalia Veselnitskaya. And it was Fusion GPS that worked with her to set this up. FBI bombshells are also yet to come. The FBI has stonewalled congressional subpoenas for documents related to the dossier, but that became harder once the DNC and the Clinton team was learned to have paid for it. Paul Ryan yesterday announced the FBI had finally pledged to turn over its dossier file next week. Look, she is right there. Bombshells galore in this. The FBI, James Comey, John Brennan, as you know now, treated this dossier as the basis and foundation for all of this, folks. All of this phony, worthless, totally made-up investigation into Trump. There's never been anything to this. There were all of these investigations, all of these people hired, all of this money. The whole thing is a giant scam. And high government officials from Brennan at the CIA to Comey at the FBI have admitted that this dossier was so troubling and so serious that it formed the basis of their entire investigation. And so the bombshell that is waiting to drop on the FBI is, what did they really know? And what ties to the FBI did Fusion GPS have? In other words, what kind of chicanery was used to get this dossier into the FBI's hands? What kind of cooperation has there been? Now, assuming that the FBI is comprehensive in its disclosure, meaning forthcoming, Ms. Strassel expects to learn that the Trump dossier was a major basis of investigating the Trump team, despite reading like the National Enquirer as Trey got it. Well, you already know this. And Ms. Strassel knows that what she's waiting for is documented proof. We already have it. Folks, I guess people don't remember Brennan saying this. And I don't know if we had a soundbite or if I remember him seeing on TV, but John Brennan, CIA, said this dossier formed the basis. And Comey had it, And it was McCain that gave it to Comey or somebody. And Comey, I mean, the whole FBI was in on all of this. So what Strassel's waiting for here is proof via release of records that the FBI was seriously taking the assertions in this dossier and using it to form the investigation. There's still plenty yet to come in regard to the DNC and the Clinton campaign. Every senior Democrat is saying they didn't know anything about this. And they're leaving that law firm, Perkins Coie, holding the bag. They're trying to make it, they're trying to shove all of this off on that law firm. This law firm went rogue, and they hired Christopher Steele, and they hired the Russians, and they had this thing written on Trump, this dossier, and they didn't tell Podesta, and they didn't tell Blabbermouth Schultz, and they didn't tell Hillary. The law firm did it all. I imagine the law firms being well compensated to take this hit. I imagine Perkins Coie is going to have a lot of billable hours they'll get for taking this hit. Plus, they're going to try to rely on attorney-client privilege to release as little information about this as they can. But while it's not unusual for law firms to hire opposition research outfits like Fusion GPS, it is highly unusual for a law firm to pay bills without a client's approval. Somewhere, Perkins Coie has documents showing who signed off on those bills to pay Fusion GPS. And they are not protected by attorney-client privilege, so that's another bombshell. And then there are the bombshells with regard to unmasking of Americans and surveilled communications. If the Steele dossier reports, which date back to June 2016, when they were making their way into the hands of senior Democrat National Committee and Clinton political operatives' hands, you can bet they were making their way to the Obama White House. All of this that she supposes is right on the money. And there are bombshells in every area here waiting to drop once Fusion GPS is forced to release bank records and once the investigation continues on. And you can tell something's up because we'll have the audio soundbites coming up, and every Democrat under the sun is running away from this, claiming they didn't know. They didn't know anything about it. Some are making excuses for it. There's nothing to see here. This is politics as usual. But nobody is coming out and defending it, which I find fascinating. Nobody in direct response to this is coming out and defending it. You do have ancillary drive-bys still carrying the torch of Trump-Russia collusion, but they're not talking about this in the context of those reports. Quick time out. We'll be back with more right after this. There's a shock poll out of Virginia, Hampton University poll that shows Ed Gillespie significantly ahead of Ralph Northam in the governor's race of Virginia. Now, this is considered a Democrat fait accompli. I mean, the punk, Terry McAuliffe, is the incumbent, got all kinds of ways of massaging the vote there for his party, but Gillespie has pulled ahead. Now, Gillespie's an establishment Republican. Gillespie's right out of the George W. Bush machine, and yet he's ahead. We had a caller the other day. What do we in Virginia do? Both these guys are establishmentarians. They're in the swamp. What do we do? I said, it's a good question. But let me ask you this. How is Gillespie campaigning? I was going to say, is Gillespie running as a Bob Corker or a Jeff Flake? He is running at, well, you can say Trump light. I'm just going to say Gillespie's running as a Trumper. On balance. I mean, he's not running as a never-Trumper. He's not running as what you would think a Republican establishmentarian to be running as. He's running as a conservative, which he, by the way, happens to be. I know Gillespie. I don't want to say that too loud. He might consider it harmful to vote in Virginia. But he's not running away from Trump is the point, and he's pulled ahead in this poll, which... If he wins, and it's a big if, we don't know, of course, for a while, but it will prove something. Well, it'll demonstrate something. It'll demonstrate that establishment Republicans can win if they get on board the Trump agenda. Now, that's only half the battle. They have to stay there once they get into office, and that's been where the crapshoot is. We'll see. Back to the phones we go. Stephen, Attleboro, Massachusetts. I'm glad you called. Welcome to Open Line. Yay! What's up?
How are you? Not so much. Second-time caller, Rush, and it's an honor to speak to you. I love the subject. It's great, but I have to take us back to taxes in New York City. You're right. Probably 37,000 people pay those taxes, but you got to remember, people are paying very, very high rents. You know, it costs a lot to live in New York City. So these people that are paying the taxes could not get that money to pay it if the little guy, like us, you know, the poor guys, so to speak, you know, the middle class is paying that tax inevitably through, you know, paying their rents and store prices and going to stores, shopping, et cetera, et cetera. You got it? You understand?
I think so, but I want to take some time with this.
Oh, not the great Rush Limbaugh. Come on.
I just want to make sure I heard you right, is all.
Okay. No,
Let's
no,
start
I'm
with
not
the
making
first.
fun of you. I love you.
Well, you're on a
I love you.
you're on a cell call, which to me you sound like Charlie Tuna. Okay, that's number one. So number two, did you say that while it may be 38,000 New Yorkers that are paying over half the freight, they're still paying very, very high income tax rates?
No, what I'm saying is...
Okay, hang on. I could have sworn you said that, and it's a good point. But don't go away. And we're back to Stephen in Attleboro, Massachusetts. So I had a chance to go back and read the transcript of what you said, and now I get it. You were saying they weren't paying high rents. You were saying the middle class is paying high rent, right?
Well, what the point I'm trying to make is, I think the point you're trying to make on your show a lot is that the rich in this country are paying the freight of all the bills. On paper, you're right. On paper, it looks that way. But you have to understand, the rich are getting their money from somebody. And in New York City, it's in the form of rents or commerce in the stores, etc.
Right.
So they wouldn't have the money to pay these high taxes if the people weren't paying them. You know what I'm saying?
Right, I get what
we're paying the freight.
What you're saying, while sounding like you're in a barrel 6 feet underwater, to me, that's just... I'm sure anybody else can hear you sound normal, but that's why it took me a while to figure this out. What you're saying is that the middle class are actually providing the revenue that these rich New Yorkers are using to pay all these taxes.
Bingo. Got it.
That's called making the complex understandable, folks. That's called wailing it all down to the bare essence. Now, you mentioned rents, so obviously it's a bugaboo to you. You think, obviously, the landlords of New York are paying a high freight of the income tax revenue, and they're getting that money through these exorbitantly high rents, right?
Well, that's called capitalism, isn't it?
Yeah, but I'm not arguing with that. Look,
right.
My point is, I don't think it's landlords that are paying the gigantic percentage of freight. I think it's Wall Street people.
Ah, okay. That's okay. I didn't know that's what you were really referring to, but it's not just Wall Street. I mean, everybody has to pay to live in New York, and it's not.
But we're talking about 37,500 people who pay 50% of the total New York City, not state. We're talking New York City tax revenue. Now, yes. I don't doubt that rents are sky high. I used to live there and paid them. I know exactly that. But I don't think it's just landlords ripping people off that are ending up and then pay. I think a lot of people on Wall Street are making gazillions of money in the tech sector especially, and they are paying a percentage. But you're being contentious with me for no reason here. I'm not.
What's that mean? What's that mean? I don't consensus.
It means you're arguing with me for no reason here. I haven't criticized anything you've said.
Correct, and I just didn't want you to misinterpret this call because definitely I'm on your shot. I watch you guys on TV. I listen to Sean. I watch Sean. I mean, believe me, I am a conservative. But the only point I'd like to make to you, Rush, is yes, these people are paying the taxes, but inevitably the money, it's capitalism. It's people paying for things to give these rich the money to pay these.
Okay,
large
let me
right?
I need a clarifying question. Are you upset about that or not? That's why I can't tell from the tone of your voice.
Oh, no. I'm not upset at all. No, not a little bit. No, I'm just saying this is just how the world goes. It's called capitalism. People pay bills. People pay their bills. People pay, it's just, that's how the world goes around.
Okay.
I mean, seriously. Yeah, I agree with it.
What we have here is female logic in the minds of a guy. And that's why I had
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I have a problem with it. I'm sorry. I can't believe I got through to you, Rush. I can't believe.
Well, let me ask you this, Stephen. This was iPhone 10 day. Did you get in line, try to get one? Did you stay up at 3:00 and order one?
I would definitely do that. Yes.
No, did you? Did you?
Oh no. I'm sorry. I didn't. No.
You did. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have any iPhone 10s because if you didn't order one within 2 minutes last night, you have to wait 5 to 6 weeks to get yours.
Okay.
But wait, what I do have is a bunch of iPhone 8s and 8 Pluses, and I want to tell you something. I have an 8 Plus, and it's the best phone I have ever had. The only difference in the 8 Plus and the 10 is the screen is full screen on the 10, and it's an OLED screen versus LCD, and it doesn't have the Face ID stuff. But aside from that, the 8 Plus, it has wireless charging, it has fast charging, it has the new fastest chip that's in the same chip that's in the 10. It's got the same camera system with the same improvements. It's the same phone, but it's not in the body of the iPhone 10. And I was just going to offer you one if you'd like one. But I
would definitely like one. Yeah, thank you. That's really, really nice of you, Rush.
I'm happy to do it. Now, which size do you want? Do you want the 8, which is the 4.7-inch screen, or the Plus, which is the 5.5-inch screen?
Well, I would ask for your recommendation, please, on that. Which one do you think would be the best one?
The Plus.
And then I'll take that one.
All right. And you've got two colors. You've got black or gold. Which one do you want?
I better choose black. I won't go any further than that. I want to be, politically correct.
What are you thinking? There's a racial component to choosing the color of your phone? I'm not going to go any further. It's typical. New Yorkers choose everything black because it doesn't show the dirt. Okay, so, Stephen, I need you to hang on here so that Mr. Snerdley can get your address so we can send the phone out to you. And I'm going to include a 29-watt charger and a cable to go. Don't use the charger that comes in the box. Use what I send you, and it'll charge the phone faster than it's ever been charged. You'll be dazzled by this thing. The iPhone 10 was released for pre-order at a minute after midnight Pacific time. And after 2 or 3 minutes, if you didn't get your order in, the soonest you're going to get one delivered is 5 to 6 weeks. So I've got these iPhone 8 Pluses here. And I figure I'm going to start giving some of them away because even if you're waiting on a 10, you should, and you happen to get through here, you should accept the offer of the 8 Plus. It's free and you can use it until your 10 arrives if you've ordered one. If not, see what you think about it. I'm telling you, it is the best cell phone in the world right now, outside of the 10. And the 10, nobody has it yet, so technically it's still the best cell phone in the world. It's an amazing improvement. The problem is it looks like last year's and the years before, but it is stunningly improved. Battery life, I've never seen anything like it. The camera and the effects that can be done with this camera are the identical things you can do in the iPhone 10. In fact, I actually think, I have a theory. Do you all know what decoy pricing is? Decoy, Stephen here just mentioned capitalism. And capitalism has many, many, many brilliant aspects. And one of those brilliant aspects in the hands of people that know what they're doing is pricing. And I think that the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus are decoys this year. Let me explain it with a different subject than phones. Let's take a magazine that offers a print edition and an online edition. So there's 2 different ways that you can have this magazine, but they offer 3 prices. The first price, $59 for print edition only. The second price, $159 for the print edition and the web version. And the third price is $159, same price, for only the web version. So you've got two prices and three products. So your question is, what are they really trying to sell here? They're trying to sell a combo print and web. But how do they make that price look effective? Very simple. $59 for the print only, $159 for the web only, or $159 for the print and web. What are you going to choose? The odds are you're going to choose the web because you think you're getting a deal. By having the web-only version priced the same as the print and the web, the psychology is you're going to take the price that gets you both of them because you think you're saving big. So the decoy in those three is the web version only at $159. Well, in the case of the iPhones, you have last year's iPhone 7 and 7 Plus, which were just dynamic, great phones, but they have been reduced in price this year by $100 to $150. Then you have the iPhone 10, which is the new phone, and it's the first phone that costs $1,000. The iPhone 7 is around $750. In the middle is the iPhone 8. And the iPhone 8 costs what the new iPhone 7 and 7 Plus did last year, plus $50. They've priced the iPhone 8 as fairly close to the iPhone 10 because it's almost as good, but it doesn't have a couple key things: the full screen and the Face ID. And my theory is that the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus are the decoys, and that what Apple's actually trying to do is sell more iPhone 7s and iPhone 10s because they know they're going to sell the 10. And I think I'm right because early analytical data suggests the iPhone 7 is outselling the iPhone 8. Now, the press, the tech media is a bunch of idiots and doesn't understand what I just told you. So they're looking at the iPhone 8 as an abject failure. It had no chance. Up against the iPhone 10, the iPhone 8 had no chance at the way it was priced. The iPhone 7, if you don't want to spend $1,000 on the 10, you're going to go to the 7. It's exactly what's happening. The iPhone 8 is the decoy. And they're selling the hell out of iPhone 7s that are a year old because of the price differential between that and the 10. Now, here's what next is going to happen. As the the supply-demand equilibrium gets into gear, when we get to the point where you can walk to an Apple store and buy an iPhone 10 because they got enough of them and they're in stock, and you have to wait 5 or 6 weeks to get one. At that point, the iPhone 8 is going to start moving off the shelves because the iPhone 8 is going to be the next best thing you can get if you can't afford or don't want to spend $1,000 on a 10. I think it's brilliant. I think decoy pricing is absolutely is brilliant in its psychological scope. Doesn't work all the time. But in that example I gave you of magazine subscriptions, guaranteed. In fact, it's an actual example from The Economist. What I gave you is an actual example of decoy pricing from the British magazine The Economist. They started with print only. Nobody buys print only, unless you're 75 years old. Print only for $59.95. Web only $159. But web and print, same price, $159. Guess what sells? 80% of the sales are print and web. The decoy is the $59 print-only price. Anyway, I got to take a break. Or you might say the decoy is the $159 web-only price. But with two products and three prices, one of them's a decoy. And it's the same thing here with the iPhone 10 and the iPhone 8. The 7 is what people who don't want the 10 are going to buy because it's so much cheaper than it was last year. And the word is the 8's not that much better, even though it really is. But you notice Apple's not promoting the 8. Not yet. They want to sell the 7s. They got a bunch of them made. They're in inventory. It's brilliant stuff. And we go back to the phones at Open Line Friday. Brighton, Colorado. Macy, 12 years old, is with us. Macy, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm really good, thank you. I'm glad it's Friday, too.
Me too. I'm calling just to say thank you for your show and Hillsdale College, because I've learned a lot. I'm taking the online course right now about the Constitution.
Wait a minute. You are 12 years old, and you're taking a course online that is taught to college freshmen and sophomores, and you follow it?
Yeah, I do.
That's amazing. You must be brilliant.
Oh, thank you so much.
Which I would understand, given that you listen to this program. I think listening here would prepare you well for a Hillsdale lecture, but I'm dazzled. That is incredible. 12 years old, and you're actually able to get something out of those lectures on the Constitution?
I am. It's very interesting, and my grandpa, he listens in with me, too, and he's the one that introduced me to your show.
Now, I have to ask you, what grade are you in school at age 12?
I'm in 7th grade.
7th grade. So how much, just in school, have you been taught about the Constitution so far?
Well, we haven't, since the school year just began, we haven't really learned very much, but it's very interesting to get more background knowledge, so when I do learn it.
So in grades, it's been so long for me, I've forgotten, so you have to refresh me. In grades like 2 through 6, there wasn't much, if anything, on the Constitution, right?
Yeah, and we haven't really learned anything yet either.
And yet here you are, you're taking a college-level course on it. You have no backgrounding in it yet. You have no foundation built. Well, what is your thought? I'd be fascinated to know what you think of the Constitution, with this being the first that you've learned about it. What are your impressions been?
My impression is that I think it's very, I think that the Americans are very brave for standing up to the British, and I feel that if that didn't happen back then, that our world wouldn't be like it is today.
Well, that's absolutely true. I'm blown away by how many lectures in the series have you seen so far?
Right now I've seen about 2.
Oh, well, you've got a long way to go.
Yeah.
I got to say, the people of Hillsdale are going to be so blown away that you are able to follow this and learn from it. They're going to be jazzed. They're going to be thrilled.
Thank you.
You're probably ahead of some of the students that are on campus.
Thank you so much.
Well, you're more than welcome. I'll tell you what. Do you have an iPad, Macy?
No, I don't.
Would you think your granddad or your parents would mind if I gave you one?
I don't think they would mind.
Because you could really put one to use.
Oh, thank you so much.
You would really be able to put one to use. Now, there are 2 sizes here. One's a 10.5-inch screen, and the other's big. It's like 13 inches. They're identical except for the size. They got the same guts, they got the same process, same everything. Which size do you think would be easiest for you to use and carry around?
To be honest, I think the bigger one would be.
Everybody chooses the bigger one. Right on. Okay, I have one just for you, and I'm going to send you a fast charging cable to it, so that this will charge it
so much.
Twice as fast as what's in the box. So hang on, Macy, so we can get an accurate FedEx address for you to get that thing out. It's amazing that she is 12 years old and taking a college online course in the Constitution. That blows my mind. We'll be right back. Fastest 3 hours in media, Open Line Friday, with some fascinating calls today, and there are more of them lined up. When we come back in the next hour, we're going to start our tour of the audio soundbites and get our jollies listening to a bunch of Democrats and the media people say, I didn't know anything about it. It's not any big deal. I don't think this indicts Hillary. I don't think this changes the equation. Trump is still a pig, and he's still guilty. We've got it all. We have it all coming up. So take a breather, take a break, and be back revved and loaded in mere moments. The views expressed by the host on this program documented to be almost always right, 99.8% of the time. The views expressed by the host of this program, the result of a daily, unstoppable, relentless pursuit of the truth. Let's go.
Live from a Southern Command in sunny South Florida, it's Open Line Friday.
One big exciting broadcast hour remains, and as we go to the phones, it can be whatever you wish to talk about. 800-282-2882. Email address lrushbo@eibnet.us. The Wall Street Journal editorial board. Something's happening over there. They are calling for Robert Mueller to resign from the independent or special counsel Russian probe. I wonder why. Why would they want Mueller to resign? I'll tell you why. Mueller is hip deep in this uranium business, having been in the director of the FBI during a portion of the Obama administration, and the whole Russian thing is a hoax. There wasn't any and hasn't been any, and there will not be any to be found, Trump collusion with Russia. Now with the news that the Democrat National Committee and the Clinton campaign, via a law firm, cutout law firm, paid Fusion GPS to manufacture the Trump dossier. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna mention this again. Folks, it gives rise to a very relevant question. What is Mueller really doing? If you look at the people involved here in the establishment of this investigation, you got Mueller. You have Rod Rosenstein, who is the Deputy Attorney General now, but he has, from what I'm told, fingerprints on some of these things, some of the uranium stuff. It's all this establishment stuff. I'll tell you what, I'm just going to repeat again. I think the real purpose of this investigation, and remember, all of this is predicated on something. Everybody in the swamp thought that Hillary was going to win. They all knew what a lousy candidate she was. Do not misunderstand. They all realized she was a lousy candidate. But at least they thought Trump was an abomination. They thought everybody else thought that. They thought she was going to win and win big. And prior to the campaign, there had been all kinds of these crazy things. The Clintons involving the guy in Canada helping to facilitate the sale of 20% of our uranium supply to a Russian company, with the Clintons in the middle benefiting financially two different ways, bill speeches and donations to the Clinton Foundation. And who knows whatever else. With Trump winning and in charge of the Department of Justice, there's a lot of stuff that they've got to get busy and try to erase, cover up, or what have you. Now, I'm just speculating here. I am using intelligence guided by experience, coupled with my unassailable expertise in liberalism and establishmentarian or ruling class politics. And just as we've been listening to the media and the Democrats tell us that Trump colluded with Russia, what turns out to be true is that they were colluding with Russia. How often is it, folks, that we learn various things Democrats are charging us or Republicans with doing, they are or have actually are doing or have done? It's one of the feints I think they use to throw people off their scent, to accuse everybody else of doing what they're doing, and at the same time to act like it's the greatest outrage and the greatest affront to civility and democracy and the Constitution that there's ever been. Meanwhile, these people's fingerprints at the end of the day are all over everything, and that's exactly what this dossier demonstrates. The dossier is theirs. They wrote it. They paid for it. They commissioned it. They asked for it to be written, and they allowed Fusion GPS to get hold of Christopher Steele, who then got hold of Russians. The Russians colluded with the Hillary campaign, essentially, to write this dossier on Trump. It's one of the biggest scandals to hit this town. It's not being described as such, but there's no other way to look at this. And you add that to this Uranium One business, and you look at the Mueller investigation, and to me, adding or connecting the dots, it wouldn't surprise me if the real purpose of all of this is to try to cover up or erase or obfuscate the discovery of even more. And it's all disguised as an investigation to get Trump, to save America, to save our democracy, to save our election system and so forth. But I don't put anything past these people. I don't give them the benefit of the doubt on anything. This is why I have so little patience, people on our side wanting to work with them. Cross the aisle legislation. But it wasn't just Democrats. Look at McCain. McCain was eager to have this dossier shown to be accurate. McCain wanted to get rid of Trump every bit as much as the Democrats. But I think the cover may be blown. The Wall Street Journal is establishmentarian, guys. The Wall Street Journal is in the club, and they now demanding that Mueller resign from this. That's a breakdown among the never-Trumper inside the Beltway establishment. Jonathan Turley, who is a law professor at George Washington University, says that the Clinton allegations are more recognizable as a criminal allegation than any of the allegations against Trump, and that the Uranium One deal is more likely to be a crime than anything Trump has done. Turley is a Democrat at the end of the day. Obama CIA Director Leon Panetta. This is not Brennan. Panetta was a CIA director at one time. He said yesterday congressional committees need to investigate who in the Clinton campaign knew what and when about payments for the Trump dossier. He was asked about Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta and the Debbie Wasserman Schultz denials about knowing who paid for the dossier. He said, well, it's obviously something that the Intelligence Committee is going to have to look at. Knowing presidential campaigns as I do, said Panetta, they're big operations. Somehow the left hand may not know what the right hand is doing, and that could be the case here, but I really do think the committee is going to have to get into this, determine just exactly what happened, who knew what and when. This is going to be up to the Republicans to do. Now, as long as Devin Nunes is involved, I don't have any doubts the Republicans will. Richard Burr, on the other hand, I'm not so sure that Burr is going to carry this out as far as it should go. Adding further mystery to the who knew what and when question was the revelation Thursday that Podesta testified to the Senate Intelligence Committee earlier this month that he was not aware of who paid for the dossier. But he was sitting right next to Mark Elias, the Perkins Coie lawyer who orchestrated a deal to pay Fusion GPS to create the Trump dossier. And for Podesta sitting next to the guy who did it and lied about it for a year, for Podesta to say he was not aware, strange credulity. Mark Elias was general counsel for the Clinton campaign and the DNC. He was also Podesta's attorney. These people as thick as thieves. I don't think a one of them did not know. I think there may be plausible deniability that they've tried to construct for themselves, but I think they all had to know what they were doing. This is coordinated. And it had a specific objective to get Trump out of there and to somehow get Hillary in the White House. I don't doubt for a minute that's what they were really shooting for here, even though she lost the election. They were entitled to this. This was theirs. They were running against a guy who wasn't supposed to get 20% of the vote. It was her turn. They all were expecting to return to their positions of power inside government. And I think they were disillusioned and deranged enough to literally think that if they could construct things to make this entire election look rigged, that would even disqualify Pence from becoming vice president. I think they had every desire as delusional as it is, or as it sounds, I think at the beginning of this, they were dreaming of somehow reversing all of this and getting Hillary in the White House. Do you doubt that? Now, I guarantee you, if this opinion of mine is put before panels on cable TV, Limbaugh's nuts. That's outrageous. Has he forgotten the Constitution? That's not possible. Precisely. It's not possible. But I don't doubt for a minute that some in this group were fantasizing about it, including Hillary. There was no one more entitled and thinking she was more deserving of her than getting this office. And there's nobody in that whole camp that was probably more outraged at this election being stolen from her. They, to this day, don't think they lost it. They, to this day, don't think it was possible that they genuinely lost. Something happened. And if they now have arrived at the hard, cold reality that she lost, it doesn't mean that they have given up. I don't think they any longer harbor the idea that they could install her president. But they want to make people pay for this. Their hatred is a poison. This is intense, raw hatred combined with resentment and anger and envy, and it has poisoned them, all of them. And I think they're going to come back here and get bitten real hard. Let's go to the audio sound bites. Last night, CNN Situation Room, Wolf Blitzer. He has Panetta and Debbie Blabber. Panetta is talking about Debbie Blabbermouth Schultz and Hillary Podesta denying the knowledge of payments to Fusion GPS. And here's Blitzer with the question.
All right, so it's very awkward. How could both the chair of the DNC and the Clinton campaign not know about these payments?
Well, it's obviously something that the Intelligence Committee is going to have to look at. Knowing presidential campaigns, they're big operations, and somehow the left hand may not know what the right hand is doing.
But if a lawyer who was representing the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign, Mark Elias, is sitting next to John Podesta, wouldn't it be his responsibility to at least whisper in his ear, yes, and tell him what was going on? So if he wasn't lying, John Podesta, he would be able to clarify all of that before the committee in a sensitive issue like this?
Well, it certainly makes the situation very awkward.
When you hear this as opposed to read it, it becomes even more ridiculous. Come on, Leon. Well, it's a big operation. Somehow the left hand may not know what the right hand is doing. These people know what every hand and every finger on every hand is doing. It stretches and strains credulity to believe in this system. Even Wolf Blitzer pointing out that Mark Elias was sitting right next to Podesta, who admitted earlier to lying for a full year about this. Now, for you millennials in the audience, this is typical Democrat obfuscation. Well, it's really confusing. There's a lot of people in there, and it's entirely believable that so many powerful people may be acting independently, and one of them may not knowing what the other's doing. Yeah, Wolf, it's entirely believable that this was nothing but innocent, and that nobody knew what was going on. For those of you who are not old enough to remember, I'll take you back to July 20th, 2004. Then Governor Bill Richardson, Democrat in New Mexico, was talking about Sandy Berger. Now, Sandy Berger was a national security director for the Clintons, for Bill Clinton during his term in the 1990s. Sandy Berger was found to have stolen documents from the National Archives. Sandy Berger went to the National Archives and stole some notes about the Clinton-Nowinski thing and tried to get out of the archives with the notes in his socks. Do you remember? Now, you millennials may not. That's why I'm telling you. I want you to listen to the excuse that Bill Richardson offered. And Bill Clinton, by the way, pretty much said the same thing.
Well, obviously, Sandy's admitted to a mistake in that process, but I've known him for 20 years. I'm sure it was a careless, sloppy moment. An investigation is going on. But I believe that what Sandy was... I always remember him as disheveled. You know, he had 50 papers running around, his tie was off, sort of like me. And I just think maybe this is a case of sloppiness. I don't think there was any malicious intent.
Oh, no, of course not. He wouldn't have purposely put those papers in his socks. That had to be sloppiness. You know, Sandy. And this is what Bill Clinton said. Hey, you know, Sandy worked for me a long time. That guy, he's one of the sloppiest people you ever saw. You didn't want to walk in his office. You might not be able to find a pathway to the chair to sit down. There's so much crap on the table, on the floor. I'm telling you, Sandy, if something ended up in his socks on the way out of the National Archives, I just think that, you know, Sandy might have thought his socks were in a wastebasket. I don't know. Well, in which case, what's he doing throwing anything away? No, the guy stole stuff. He was trying to get documents out of there. I forget. He was either trying to keep them from being found or he needed them to refresh his memory about something. And he literally took them out of there. And all the Democrats circled the wagons. He's just sloppy. Sandy, everybody knows, hell, he probably didn't even know they were in his socks. He's just a good old guy like that. And now here's Panetta. You know, on the terms of buying that dossier, I mean, it's not just didn't believe it. But the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. I can totally understand that nobody knows who did it over there. And in fact, the person who did do it probably doesn't remember doing it. It's disorganized. It's typical of how they lie their way out of these things. And don't forget, they've got the help of the drive-by media furthering whatever excuse they give. I have had some people tell me that they don't ever remember hearing John Brennan say that the dossier formed the basis for the investigation. Friends, I mean, I'm not talking about opponents or enemies. I've had, Rush, you better be sure about this. I said, I'm sure. Well, I can't find anything, Rush. Well, you look harder. So I called Cookie. I said, would you search our soundbite archives? We've got it set up in keyword search, even the audio, because we keep the transcripts. You keyword search for Brennan and basis. He said, we don't have it. I said, well, that just means we didn't have the bite, but I know I saw this. And it happened. It had to be here, and it happened to be on one of these two monitors, and it happened to be before the show. I saw it. So Cookie, she took off all of the binders and she went, and I think this is a LexisNexis search, although I'm not entirely sure, but we found it, is the bottom line. It happened May 23rd, 2017 on Capitol Hill. It was during a House Intelligence Committee hearing. The former CIA director, John Brennan, testifying as being questioned by Trey Gowdy. And they're talking about the dossier. And let me get to the relevant question from Gowdy. He said, it doesn't help us a lot. What was the nature of the information? Brennan, I'm not going to respond to particular elements of your question because I think it'd be inappropriate for me to do so here. I can only repeat what I said, which is that I was aware of intelligence and information about contacts between Russian officials and U.S. persons that raised concerns in my mind about whether or not those individuals were cooperating with the Russians, either in a witting or unwitting fashion, and it served as the basis for the FBI investigation to determine whether such... Right there, it was May 23rd. They were talking about the dossier. He denied it later in the same hearing. Let me try... Sal in Lafayette, Louisiana, you're next. Great to have you here. What is this about liberals and fantasy football? How are they changing it?
Well, Rush, my problem is, and first of all, mega dittos.
Thank you. Thank you.
I've been listening to talk radio since before you came on, back in the early 80s. But anyway, back that time, I was doing I was the assistant commissioner of the Cajun Football League, which was fantasy football owners and everything. And prior to computers, we did everything by using the box scores, and just touchdowns and field goals and safeties.
This is fascinating because in 1979, 1980, Inside Sports, now defunct, came out with a story on fantasy football, and I and 5 other guys, the Kansas City Royals, formed the PFL, the Paper Football League, and I was the commissioner. We had to do the same thing. We had to wait for box scores every Monday before we found out who won, and it was a blast. I know exactly what you're talking about.
It was, I was, like I said, the assistant commissioner, where my duties were to do the scores and check with the commission to make sure my scores matched with his, and then we put the scores out. But today, now I'm in a Rotary Club. I've been in a Rotary Club for the past, 10, 20 years. But we started up a fantasy league, and I was the commissioner until I resigned this year. I couldn't do it anymore because I had too many people complaining. Now, this is a group of conservative guys in our club, vote conservative and everything, but they screamed and hollered at me because I was only giving them points for their touchdowns and field goals. I wasn't giving them their 10th of a point for every yard that they gained, like they get in other leagues. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Your runner ran for 100 yards, did not score a touchdown, but yet you want 10 points for that.
Well, now, wait a minute, though. Was that the rules they set up for their league, or were they trying to change your rules?
In other leagues, they were trying to change mine because other leagues were giving a point for every 10 yards you ran. Even if you didn't score a touchdown.
Well, you can set whatever rules you want in fantasy football to make it interesting. My league was like yours. You had to score a touchdown. There were no defensive points. We did have points for kickers, but not extra points. Had to be field goals.
No, we gave points for. You got 1 point for that extra point.
That was considered automatic.
We didn't give. If he kicked a 50-yard field goal, we didn't give him an extra 2 points.
Oh, we did.
So,
absolutely. This is my point. Every league can make up its own rules. If you want to give points for every 10th of a yard rush, go ahead. The point is, you had rules they came in and tried to change.
We were coming in and setting this up as a fantasy owners. Like, you are an owner of the football team,
right?
And as the owner of a real football team that you're imagining, the real football team does not score a point unless they kick a field goal, score a touchdown, safety.
Okay, so you're saying the liberals did this. They're responsible for the what?
Oh, my God. These conservative guys were screaming and crying because they wanted more points for their players who did not score a touchdown.
What's typical?
I'm sorry. That's not in fantasy football. If you're fantasizing that you are an owner.
Liberals want trophies for losing. This shouldn't surprise you.
It's like, I'm sorry. I just can't give you these points. So actually, I fought with him for 2 years, and then I said, I'm not doing this anymore, and I gave up my commissionership, and now I'm in a point for every yard you make almost. I'm scoring 144 points a week.
Well, whatever. If you sign up for it and those are the rules, that's fine. You could start your own league if you want to go back to the way you did it. If you could find just 4 or 5 guys to join you.
Oh, you can't find that many. You can't find 4 or 5 guys that are looking for the old way of scoring. They all want the liberal points.
For doing nothing, essentially.
Exactly.
They want points for not scoring.
Exactly.
Sounds like Harvey Weinstein, actually.
That's true. So I wanted your point of view on that, on how it got so liberal and just the scoring.
Oh my God, the liberals are corrupting everything out there, Sal. This doesn't surprise me. Left to their liberals couldn't create a fantasy league. This is the bottom line. Liberals don't like football to begin with. All they can do is, you create it, you and your guys create it, and they look at it and they resent you enjoying it. And they resent you having a good time, so their objective is to come screw it up for you. And it sounds like you've let them get away with it. Anyhow, before I let you go, Sal, this is iPhone 10 day, so I'm giving away iPhone 8s. And 8 Plus. Well, you want one? You want an 8 or an 8 Plus?
Well, I'll tell you what. I take an 8 Plus for my wife. I have a 7, and I'm happy with it. But my wife has a 6, and she was talking about getting a new phone, and I figure, well, that'd be nice to give her.
All right, we'll give you an 8+. You know, I thought about this. I was thinking, this is kind of not cool the day that 10 comes out to be giving away the 8, but nobody can get the 10 yet. And if you still want to get a 10, this was not going to cost you anything, so you'll be able to sell it and upgrade if you want. But what color? I'm going to send her a gold one. The gold is they're
That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you, bro.
It's unlocked.
A gift horse in the mouth.
She was an 8+, right?
8+. That'll be great.
Okay,
Thank you.
so she's it's unlocked, so she can swap her SIM card and she'll be up and running. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Great.
Okay, Sal, hang on. So we got the address in order to get this out. To have a brief timeout. We'll be back and continue right after this. Grab soundbite number 7. Got to get this. Gloria Borger yesterday afternoon, CNN, Brooke Baldwin talking to her about Debbie Blabbermouth Schultz, John Podesta, denying knowledge of payments to Fusion GPS for the Trump dossier. Gloria Borger says,
in the dark world of opposition research, what you want to do, I would assume, is establish an awful lot of distance between the candidate and the people close to the candidate and the people who are doing the opposition research. If it is useful, eventually it will make its way up the ladder, and at some point, the candidate may know about it, but may not even know where it came from. What you want to do is keep the candidate with a certain amount of deniability. And I think that this is the way it works.
Gloria, this may work on the slow and out-of-touch CNN audience, but come on, man! In the first place, this is not opposition research. Opposition research is stuff that's true that your investigators dig deep and find. This was made up. This was commissioned. This was bought and paid for through a Democrat lackey law firm cutout. Perkins Coy. Mark Elias lied for a year about their involvement. She would never make this excuse. If Republicans were involved in the dark world of opposition research, what you want to do is establish an awful lot of distance between the candidate and the people. BS! This was not opposition research. This was totally commissioned artwork, if you will, a totally made up. It was intended to do great damage to the Trump campaign, caused Trump a lot of hassle. It ended up being used as the basis for official investigations. Oh, there's no way Hillary would have known. Oh, no. In the dark world of opposition research, of course, you want to keep as much distance from the candidate. This from the woman who ran the bimbo eruptions unit at Clinton Ward Room. But I wanted you to hear it because it's just an example of how the media and the drive-bys do everything they can to defend. Because I guarantee you, Podesta's her friend, and Hillary is her friend, and the law firm, Perkins Coy, and people there are her friend. Podesta is her friend. And it's circle the wagons time. Got to take a break. Fastest 3 hours in media about to wrap. Well, that's it for us today and this week, folks. I have to admit, I am worn out. I don't know why, but I'm worn out. My energy level today has been about 80%. I know you couldn't tell. You'd have never known that if I hadn't told you. I also want to thank our backup substitute broadcast engineer, Friday, who has been here cracking wise both Thursday and Friday. Look forward to your return Friday. And in the meantime, folks, I hope you have a good weekend. And we'll be back on Monday, revved and ready, and I'm sure back at 100% energy level. See you then.